Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is The World This Week, and with us from Time Magazine, Vivian Walt. Also with us, Judah Grunstein of World Politics Review, Olivier Guez of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, and freelance reporter Celestine Bolin. Elections taking place on both sides of the Atlantic in 2012. With less than 2 months to go in this country, it's the home stretch. And at the same time, this week saw Super Tuesday in the United States, where 10 out of 50 states, 20%, picked their delegates to the Republican nominating convention. Now, over there, Mitt Romney's won the most delegates so far, but failed to deliver a decisive blow, which means you'll be getting a few more weeks, possibly months, of political ads like this one.
I'm Rick Santorum, and I approve this message.
Mitt Romney's negative attack machine is back on full throttle. This time, Romney's firing his mud at Rick Santorum. Romney and his super PAC have spent a staggering $20 million brutally attacking fellow Republicans. Why? Because Romney's trying to hide from his big government Romneycare and his support for job-killing cap and trade. And in the end, Mitt Romney's ugly attacks are going to backfire.
Judah Grunstein, they even have an actor impersonating Mitt Romney. Is this political campaign very different from the ones you've seen in the past?
Yeah, well, to a certain degree. I mean, even from the very first debates that I saw, I was struck by the sense that this was the first sort of reality TV presidential election where the sort of limits of discourse and the limits of the way people are willing to speak to each other and portray each other have just been lifted. It just seems like no holds barred. I mean, Newt Gingrich at one point explicitly called Mitt Romney a liar, which I don't think I've ever seen even in some of the most hardest fought political campaigns. I don't think I've ever seen that in my lifetime. And on and on and on, like that ad just showed. I mean, it's very entertaining. I'm not sure how politically informative it is, or how healthy it is for the country, but it's certainly an entertainment.
Olivier Guez, your book is called American Spleen. Is this what you were referring to?
Kind of. I mean, this is just something that I could add, in fact, to this spleen or this melancholy that I found when I was in the States. I mean, the first part of my book is a travel into the various families of the right in America, and the fights between Romney, Santorum, Gingrich, and all the others is just, I mean, shows how divided this family is. And I mean, if I were Obama, I just would wait. This is what he's doing most of the times. I mean, just wait that all these people fight each other, because they are so violent into each other. I mean, the arguments of Gingrich, for instance, against Romney are exactly the one that Democrats could use. I would say.
Vivian Walt, is it a case of more dumbed down than before? Or is it a case of just they've got a lot of money so they can hammer home the message more often?
This doesn't seem to be terribly different from previous campaigns, although maybe I just got cynical along the way. But I think what really is, Judah talks about no holds barred. What's really no holds barred is money. There are no limits at this point to how much you can spend trying to be president of the United States, and the figures are gigantic. And therefore, you can have endless negative ad campaigns. You can, this does not come cheap, Hollywood-style ad campaigns. And I think this is partly why we're seeing this kind of dragged-out mudslinging, because they can afford to do it. And it seems to me that's a really crucial element in this whole campaign.
All right, we've seen name-calling. We've also seen one-upmanship, which has been particularly intense over the candidates' respective loyalty to Israel in the standoff over Iran's nuclear program. The Denver Post's Mike Keefe sums up the saber rattling in this cartoon. Some even go way further.
My goal is really simple. I want to produce so much energy in the United States that no president ever again bows to a Saudi king. I want to produce so much energy in the United States that when the Iranians practice sealing off the Straits of Hormuz, through which 1 in every 5 barrels of oil in the world goes, we can say to the Chinese, the Indians, and the Europeans, you have a problem. You may want to figure out how to build a navy big enough to protect your asset, because we're frankly producing our own oil and it ain't our problem anymore.
What's this going to do for politics, this kind of talk?
I mean, I think, as Vivian is saying, money has a lot to do with it. The other thing is that it's, the Republican Party has really been hijacked by its extreme right wing. And so, Romney is on the defensive because he's constantly having to go through this litmus test of whether he's, to the right enough. I wonder whether, if this doesn't lead to victory in November, which it could, it very well might, that there is a center to the Republican Party. It just doesn't seem to be able to kind of establish its pride of place. I mean, it's not as if Republicans have that sort of moderate Republican, which Mitt Romney really represents, was elected to governor of Massachusetts on that basis. They've not all gone away. They're just not being heard. Money, again, yes, and also this big money, these individual donors who are able to dictate. You're talking about Israel, Sheldon, Adelson.
Yeah.
He's a big Israel, unconditional Israel supporter who is able to throw his weight around way beyond what is usually sort of considered normal. So I just think it's about sort of going back to some kind of middle ground, both perhaps in the campaign financing, although I don't know, since the Supreme Court was the one that ruled on that. And secondly, letting the silent majority speak. I mean, they didn't go away.
Right, so too early to say how it will play out in the fall. Here in France, what's the top issue? Well, this past week, the false claim by far-right leader Marine Le Pen that 100% of beef slaughtered in the Paris area is halal. The truth is under 3%. Well, that went viral when the incumbents camp decided to run with the story. And Olivier Guez, we're debating all week long in France about the way in which our beef is slaughtered. Isn't that a bit strange? We're less than 2 months from the second round of the presidential election.
It is strange, but on the other hand, it's not so strange because I think it's just a sign of the strong identity crisis there is in this country, in France. And halal is just a symbol of all of this, of all these questions concerning the French identity. I mean, you've been having debates about the French identity for years and years now, and no one has been able to kind of define it because it's very difficult. And now France is kind of celebrating the 50th birthday of the Accord d'Évian, so the independence of Algeria, and all of this is coming up, I think, in France. It's all linked to this question of identity, and halal is just the biggest symbol of all of this, all the troubles with the French, with their identity, and how political forces try to play with this question of identity and with the Muslim minority in France.
Vivian, were you expecting this to be the big topic heading into the home stretch of the presidential election?
Well, I actually did go to Marine Le Pen rally a few weeks ago, and it's what was really striking about it, of course, was all the people sort of wrapped in French flags and so on. Exactly what Olivia says, the whole imagery of, what is France and, what color are French people, etc. And it really, people were talking like that. So, yes, I think it's a highly sensitive issue, but I think it taps into a much bigger issue, which is people's terrible insecurity about the economy and great insecurity about whether they're age-old French rights of, the kind of welfare and security and so on are really going to sustain the next few years.
And what's certain is that the French president has been tacking right. He did so on Tuesday during a 3-hour interview and debate session on public television station France 2.
Our system of integration works worse and worse. Why? Because we have too many foreigners in our country, and we can't keep finding them housing, jobs, or schools. I suggest that to revive integration under more favorable conditions, we must halve the number of people that we allow in. For example, go from 180,000 to around 100,000.
Shrewd move or desperate act?
Probably a little bit of both. I think that it's true that there is this real sense of crisis and insecurity in the country with regard to identity and with regard to the economy. The difference being that Paris, the government in Paris alone, can't really impact the economy to the degree that it can impact the laws regulating how meat is butchered in slaughterhouses. So, but at the same time, in the States we call this dog whistle politics, where there are messages being sent that the intended audience can hear them, even if they can kind of pass unperceived elsewhere. And I think that all these, questions about halal meat, questions about immigration, this is definitely the right's dog whistle message to the extreme right, saying, we've heard you, we're going to take account of this. Sarkozy did it in 2007. I think this is his effort to try and express that he's willing to do it again. The question is, or the problem is that a lot of the extreme right voting base was very disappointed with Sarkozy's follow-up to some of his promises in the last 5 years. So it's unlikely that it's going to work again.
All right, we'll have to see. He's down, 58% to 42% in the second round. He's got a lot of catching up to do before the election day, first round, April 22nd. Until this week, few people outside of Africa had ever heard of Joseph Kony or the Lord's Resistance Army. But in just a few days, a half-hour web video posted by a little-known advocacy group out of San Diego, California, had been viewed more than 40 million times.
Joseph Kony, he has an army, okay? And what he does is he takes children from their parents and he gives them a gun to shoot, and he makes them shoot and kill other people.
But they're not going to do what he says because they're nice guys, right?
Yeah, they don't want to do what he says, but he forces them to do bad things. What do you think about that?
Sad.
All right, that was Jason Russell, the co-founder of Invisible Children, with his son Gavin. Celestine Bolin, what do you think of this phenomenon and of the clip you just saw?
I think it's incredible, and it's got so many things to be discussed that it's triggered. I mean, one is the video itself, which I actually did watch. I find amazingly manipulative. Very, it's sort of creepy in that way.
You wouldn't have used your own children.
No, and I mean, there's so many questions unanswered. The way it's targeted. I mean, as I say, there are many, many aspects. But one thing I think it sort of speaks to is something we were talking about, Syria. We need journalists, to sort of do reporting on things. I mean, even in this kind of a documentary, there's sort of a lack of facts and lack of context and lack of world sort of, knowledge. And it's just striking that it went out there and was surfing the web for all these days. And from the video, you get the impression this campaign has been going on quite successfully with U.S. senators signing on and all sorts of people having demonstrations all over the United States. I mean, is it true? I don't know. But it's this kind of sense of a free-floating reality, which everybody jumps onto, including, my daughter and her friends. I mean, everybody was sending it around, and it took on this life of its own. Then it got subject to lots of attacks. I feel like it's almost like a space story.
And that's an interesting point. What's interesting is how the message is targeted the young, with teenagers telling their parents of the video. And there's been like a flow of orders for the merchandising that supports Invisible Children. A lot of people getting the bracelets and whatnot. But Vivian Walt, we're now talking about this mystic guy who kidnaps children, and he's been doing it for 2 decades, but we'd never talked about it on this show ever before.
I mean, what's incredible is you might have spoken about it 10 years ago. I mean, I went to northern Uganda maybe 10 years ago to do this story, as did many journalists. And Joseph Kony's been under indictment by the International Criminal Court for 7 years. For 7 years, they have failed to bring this guy to justice.
They've tried.
They've tried, kind of, sort of. It's been, a somewhat ineffectual effort to catch him, although maybe this will be a little bit more effective. Maybe the International Criminal Court should get into the business of social media and start producing documentaries. And maybe there is a lesson to be learned here about how to communicate to millions of people.
Very prominently featured in the video. I mean, they're interviewed, and he's number one on their list. And
they both and they've said in statements since that they approve of the video.
I mean, I think that's the thing. It's not as that's what puts this into such an interesting category, because it's not as though the goal is bad. The goal is good. The goal, as you say, has eluded everybody for 7 years. It's just the method that makes me scratch my head. I mean, that's all.
At the same time, the goal is good. I mean, I don't think there are too many people defending Joseph Kony, and I don't think anyone would be heartbroken to wake up and read the news that he's been captured or killed. But at the same time, Kony at this point is more of a sort of recurring symptom of the problem than the actual cause of the problem. And I haven't watched the video. From what I've read about this sort of backlash against the video, the major problem is that the kinds of solutions that they're talking about, which are really particular to Kony, don't really treat the systemic problem or the larger problem in the region, which have to do with states manipulating militias in other states for their own ends. It has to do with weak.
The name of Uganda's president doesn't come up.
In addition, weekly enforced borders where illegal arms are being shipped. So you have this whole arc of conflict and instability that is much larger than Kony. And that isn't really addressed. I mean, again, none of that fits onto a bracelet or makes for a good ad campaign, so you probably can't generate the kind of attention that this one does.
But it would certainly make
a better documentary.
It would make a better policy.
And a full-hour debate for us as well. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Should tell you there's the backlash. Just one comment from Twitter from our friend Joseph Lake from the Economist Intelligence Unit. He says, when does the backlash against the backlash start? Who's writing the anti-Kony 2012 post? So that thanks for that, Joseph Lake. I want to thank as well Vivian Walt for joining us, Olivier Guez, Celestine Bolen, and Judah Grunstein. And thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.